Get happy, Sam. Melissa, down to your left, please.
Thank you, guys. Guys, to your places, please. Thank you, Eric.
Good morning. Welcome to this morning's first press conference. My name is Eric Kohanek. I'm the moderator. And in the spotlight today, we have Conviction, which dramatizes the incredible true story of Betty Ann Waters and her incredible quest to prove the innocence of her brother Kenny, who was found guilty of murder. With us today, we have a stellar panel. Sitting next to me is director Tony Goldwyn. Seated next to Tony is screenwriter Pamela Gray. Next to Pamela, we have, in the role of Betty Ann Waters, actress Hilary Swank. Next to Hilary, playing the role of Kenny Waters, Sam Rockwell. Next to Sam, playing the role of Abra Rice, Betty Ann Waters' best friend, is Minnie Driver. Next to her, playing Kenny's ex-girlfriend, Rosanna Perry, Juliette Lewis. And next to Juliette, playing police officer Nancy Taylor, Melissa Leo. And last, but certainly not least, the real Betty Ann Waters, upon whom the story was based. We'll open the floor to questions. If you have any questions, please. This was an 18-year quest for Betty Ann. It was a 9-year quest for you, I believe, to bring this to the screen. Can you relate a bit about how you came across the story and how you brought it?
I 9 years ago, my wife heard a piece about Betty Ann and Kenny. I think it was on 60 Minutes, because it was all over the news when Kenny was exonerated. And she told me about it. I missed the segment, but I got fascinated with this bond between this brother and sister. And I found myself asking the question, what if she had been wrong? What if he was guilty? What if she had not succeeded in getting him out of prison? Would her quest have been in vain? And I realized that the love between these two people was the thing itself, and it didn't really. The story wasn't did she or didn't she succeed. It was I wanted to explore this love story between a brother and a sister, and that's what got me interested in the story. And just took a few years to get here.
One of the interesting things about the film was the structure of it, Pamela.
Tony was an impeccable guide in it, sometimes even asking things of me because he knew the story so integrally that I didn't quite understand why, but was very willing to lay down on film for him. It's a wonderful, awesome director.
Tony, in film there's often not very much time to rehearse or to get across what you want in each of the characters. How do you approach that, or how did you approach that with each of these actors? And
well, my approach always is to talk a lot. I always feel I always make plenty of time to rehearse. But rehearsal for me is more about having relaxed time to discuss the character and what the story is about, and the underpinnings of a character's world and worldview, so that by the time we get to set, whether it's Melissa or Hilary or anyone, we're on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish. And then rehearsal always seems to go more smoothly, because in a movie you have 2 phases of rehearsal. One is before you start shooting, where you talk a lot and kind of rough things out and get a feel for it. Even by that time we'd all had, I'd made time to talk to everybody, and so that we were all clear. And then on set, when you're actually ready to shoot, I always take plenty of time to rehearse and to make sure everyone feels centered and clear about what they're doing. And the irony is, to me, the more time you take to do that, the faster the shooting goes. And people go, "You took so long to rehearse. How'd you get done so fast?" Because everyone feels sure of themselves. So that tends to be my approach.
Hilary, I wonder if you can talk about some of the difficult parts.
On something that Betty Ann pointed out, which was when you asked about Hilary and Sam finding this relationship. The thing that was most important to us, I think we discovered, Hilary and Sam and I, you know, the story is, people get very focused on what Betty Ann did for Kenny, and that Betty Ann, you know, worked so hard and had so much faith in her brother. And I knew, as soon as I met Betty Ann and heard the stories, what affected me was the opposite was true as well, as Betty Ann said. And I think it's what makes Hillary and Sam's performances so extraordinary. When every single scene that we did, if you watch them, they're not concerned for, neither of them are concerned for themselves. They're always concerned for the other person. Kenny, every time Betty Ann came to visit him in prison, Kenny was languishing in prison, but he was worried about Betty Ann. He wanted to make her laugh. He wanted to take care of her. He wanted her to be okay, and give her, inspire her with confidence, and be proud of her. And Betty Ann, too, just whatever trials and struggles she was going with her children, or school, or life, or money, or whatever, she wanted to make sure Kenny was okay. And that became the key to playing all of those scenes, as they were taking care of each other, so that neither one of, you know, what so impresses me about both of these actors in these roles is there's never a moment of self-pity at all in the film, in what they do. And it would be very easy, if you can imagine, you know, a different telling of a story like this, or of this story, for both actors playing these characters feeling, you know, burdened by the world, and self-pitying, and victimized by the world. And I think that Sam and Hillary were so successful in avoiding that, because they were always had their attention on taking care of the other person. So, and that was such a critical aspect to Betty Ann and Kenny's relationship.
Yeah, and when you meet Betty Ann, like you were, the story you tell of meeting Betty Ann, you know, you hear the story and you can't think that you would think in your mind, well, she's hardened by this. She's got to be hardened, scarred, and you know, just so angered by the system. And you meet her, and Tony tells this great story meeting her, which you can share, but of like,
you know, yeah,
showing up and thinking, you know, hi, you know, I'm Betty Ann, and she was like, oh, you made it! Oh, come on, I made you some coffee. I'm not very good at making coffee, but here, come, you know, sit down. I got some cookies, and you know, it was like, okay, so where do we start? You know,
yeah.
and just like
her
this
humility, you know,
and that's Betty Ann.
Yeah.
You know, that's Betty Ann, and it's
and we're forcing her to do it now, but
Stale cookies.
for years she would say to me, for years, yeah, and the stale cookies, which were delicious. For years she would say to me, I didn't really do anything. I just wanted to help my brother. That's what I did. I didn't really do anything.
and
we were
I
like,
did
no.
what anybody would do.
Yeah, I did what anybody would do. I just did what anybody would do. I didn't do anything that extraordinary. Really, I didn't. And Pam and I kind of had to drag it out of her. No, yes, you did.
Yes, you did.
Tony, talk a bit more about assembling the cast for this, and who you cast first, and how you structured and built the cast.
Well, Hillary was the first person I cast. Obviously, Betty Ann was the linchpin of the whole thing, and so a few years ago, Hillary and I spoke and saw eye to eye on this, and frankly, when I had seen $1 Million Baby, I'd already been a huge admirer of Hillary's work. When I saw that, I realized there was no one else who could play this part, so I had to have her, and thank God she had to have it as well. And we went through an extremely difficult time getting the movie financed, and Hill hung in and fought alongside me to get the movie made. And once we had the money, which was not long before we started shooting, we put together the rest of the cast. Sam had actually been my very first idea for Kenny 9 years ago. Pam and I were in Rhode Island interviewing Betty Ann and starting to get very excited about this story. And I think we said to each other, if we don't get Kenny right, the story won't work. He's really the key to the casting of this movie. And there aren't a lot of actors who can pull this off.
Do you remember how we met, Tony?
On
Blouse Man?
That's right. Yep, I did.
I auditioned for Viggo Mortensen's part.
That's
That's where
right.
I met
That's where
you.
we met
That's
too.
where
That's
I met
right.
you too as well.
That's
I
right.
think Viggo was better for the
That's
part.
right. Even though we were cartoon lovers, Minnie, in Tarzan.
I know, we were Tarzan and Jane.
Tarzan and Jane. That's right. But Sam and I, Sam, I'd said to Pam, before we even had an outline for the script, that we needed an actor who had this duality to him, who could be, who you adored and loved and had a kind of intelligence and sweetness and big-heartedness about him, and yet who was capable of a volatility and a madness and an unpredictability, who was always surprising you. And I remember saying to him, I was like, someone like Sam Rockwell is the guy. I said, that's someone, we need an actor like Sam Rockwell. And Pam was like, oh, yeah, he's great. But of course, we didn't have any money to offer Sam Rockwell at that time, or a script to show him. And Sammy and I met actually when I'd written the first draft, or when I'd written, sorry, Pam. When Pam had delivered the first draft of the script, before we're still in rough shape, Sam's agent called me and said, I want you to meet Sam. And Sam and I got together, this was years ago. I had never met an actor on the movie. And so Sam was like, let's talk. And we met at a coffee bar near your house. We were sort of talking about this script, which was still in rough shape. And Sam goes, we started talking, and he's like, should we go read? And actors don't usually offer to audition for you. He's like, let's go to my apartment and we'll read some of this. And I'd never read any of these scenes out loud. Do you remember when you just walked to your apartment? He's like, take me to his
That's probably a huge mistake. I didn't see Tony for like 6 years after
scenes, and I was like, I'm never casting this guy. Boy, was I wrong. No. But we had this fun. I thought, oh my God, I love Sam. He was just so free and open, and we talked about what was, needed work in the script, and anyway, about 6 years later, we ended up actually making the movie. But and then with our other three extraordinary women here, that was closer to shooting, as Sam was ultimately, because we couldn't cast the movie until we had the money to make it. And but look, casting is everything, and I find that as a director, as I go along in the world, I fall in love with certain actors and find sort of a file in my brain. I have to work with this person. And Minnie, Melissa, and Juliet were all, in that category. And they were all on the top of my list for these parts. Literally, exactly the first person I thought of for these three parts. And again, we met and talked, and thankfully they wanted to do it. Hillary was talking about the differences between she and Betty Ann. The commonality there is Hillary, too, with this movie, was unwilling to accept anything less than yes. It had to be made. And of course, I felt that way, but there were so many moments when we ran up against moments of death. And Hillary, would never, she just said, no, that's not acceptable. And she would call whoever needed to be convinced and call them, where I had run into a wall, and I'd call and talk and scream and argue, and she would find out that there was some obstacle, and she would just drive a truck through it. And as she said, over Christmas holidays, many times everything seemed to be fine, and it would all collapse in a second. And Hillary's, it was more than determination. It was just a kind of like Betty Ann with the box of evidence. It had to be there, and for me, it was a great life lesson and an inspiration to. I mean, I consider myself a fairly determined person, but before I met Betty Ann and Hillary, I didn't know what that word meant. There's just a certainty and an inner knowledge that certain things need to happen, and it's what it takes to make a movie often, and particularly a film like this, which is a delicate child. And it really is, there's this essential thing in these two extraordinary women that is the reason we're here today.
Thanks for saying that, Tony. I'm just going to add one